Hey guys, welcome to the second video I'm doing about VLANing. In the previous one I gave you a very quick, simple, basic way of you can achieve VLANing on the router, MikroTik router, and that's not necessarily the preferred method. There is the way I'm going to show you today is known as bridge filtering, and it's very similar to if you've used the newer, I say newer, for me they feel like they're newer, but they've been out for a while now, of the MikroTik switching, where you use Winbox, and it looks a very similar interface, but those devices have dedicated chips for switching, because they're a switch, whereas we're dealing with a router, so we're dealing with layer 3. So basically I'll quickly show you now a quick run through of what we set up last time. So there's our router. Zoom out a bit. And then we had two interfaces on there. We had Ether 1 and Ether 2. And then we created these additional interfaces, which were VLANs. So that was VLAN 20. And then we had VLAN 30 in here, it's a bit small. And then effectively then we had a bridge for 30, we had a bridge for 20, and then we would basically then add these interfaces into that bridge. So effectively meaning a frame comes in from VLAN 20 into Ether 1, it will basically go but get matched onto that interface and go into that bridge and go onto that network effectively. So what I'm going to show you today is known as VLAN bridge filtering, whereby we have a single bridge, and onto the bridge itself we then will create, so unlike where we create them on the interfaces, so we've got 8 interfaces, we'd have to create 8 VLAN tags, 8 VLAN interfaces to each interface, and that's just for the one VLAN we want. So we will change the color there. So we're effectively going to have our VLAN 20 actually associated against that bridge, so we just create them once, and then what we're going to do in here is we're going to make this VLAN apply VLAN filtering. And then we're going to stick in our interfaces, so Ether 1 for example, Ether 2 into here, and then within here we're going to create, and then there's a feature called VLAN in, and we're going to specify which VLANs we want on which interface. So it'll become clear when I go through it now. So we might as well just crack on, and I'll talk you through it as I go. So this is my MikroTik CHR I've got. It's exactly the same setup as I had before. The only difference is no difference. Sorry, I cleared all the config off from the last video. So if you've seen that last one, I remember I had a switch connected to port 1, which is a Cisco switch, and I've just called these two ports LANs. So I have a machine plugged into Ether 2, and then my uplink is Ether 8, and on that is basically my internet access and also my management for it. So then the two machines I've got, so off that switch, sorry, I've got another machine, and they're just here, and these are just Windows servers I've got set up for testing, and each of those has a management interface as well on that same VLAN. So basically that means, as you can see, I've got these two NICs. This one doesn't have a gateway, it's just an IP address, so it just means I'm not going to, obviously, because at the moment it's got no network access, so I wouldn't be able to get to it. So it's just a way of presenting that to you, so don't worry about any of that stuff. Yeah, that's pretty much the housekeeping. Here's my switch, just a 24 port Cisco switch. So show interface, just show runs, right? This isn't a Cisco lesson, so don't worry if you're not familiar with Cisco. This is basically just me going to show you that port 1, which is connected to my MikroTik one there, is a trunk port and is allowing all VLANs, but it has no native or untagged VLANs on it. And if we do the same for Ether 2, and this is the one that's got my Windows machine plugged in, a test 2 one, and that is on access VLAN 30. And then this one is going to be, we're going to assign this to the VLAN 20. So we're dealing with 20 and 30. As you can see, I've got no other network set up other than my WAN interface. So we've got no LAN set up. So we're going to start by doing that. So as you remember before, I had a VLAN, I had a bridge for user 1 and a bridge for user 2. I think I called it LAN and then LAN 2 bridge. And that was where the IP addressing for the two networks existed. But this time we're going to create a single bridge, and we can call this anything we like. So we just call it VLAN bridge. And then the only things we're going to do is disable spanning tree. Now this VLAN tag, we're going to use this in a minute. We're going to tick this, but word of warning, don't do this until you set your VLANs up, because you could be working on an interface. You could add an interface into this bridge which you're accessing your router on. And that's going to lose you access if you haven't set your VLAN up properly. So if you tag your traffic on that port and you're not accessing it on the tag interface from your machine, you will lose access. And I know this though because I've done it many times. Other things are, if you apply this, it will apply a bunch of dynamic based on the setup, and it will mainly just apply VLAN 1 to everything, so not the end of the world necessarily, but I would also just leave it till the end and I'll show you that as well. And there's also, when we create our network, so we're going to join, this is basically, as I mentioned in that previous one, this is a router on a stick, so when we join those VLANs into an actual layer 3 network with an IP address, they will become inactive until we would have to, if we created that after this was enabled, and I'll probably show you that you have to disable it and re-enable it again. So I'll leave that unticked. Just the only thing is just turn off spanning tree because it's optional, but we don't want to cause any other issues. Okay, so there's our VLAN bridge. Now we're going to add in our interfaces. So Ether 1, Ether 2, and Ether 3, even though there's nothing plugged into it. Okay. Now we're going to create our networks. So go to interfaces. Now, as you remember on the last one, what I did was I added a VLAN and I assigned it to Ether 1. And then I added the second VLAN and assigned it to Ether 2. So then if I had another trunk port on Ether 2, I would then have to do the same with each VLAN. Because this time we're going to apply them to the bridge itself. So we can call this VLAN 20, and it's always good housekeeping to make sure you try and just give it an obvious name of what it's for. So this is user 1, is using VLAN 20, and set the VLAN there. Okay, then we add another VLAN. Okay, user 2, VLAN 30, and again set that to 30. Okay. Right, now we can give those IP addresses and some DHCP. 112.168.1.1/24. That will be for VLAN 20. In fact, no, let's toggle that 20, make it a bit more obvious. And then we're going to go 192.168.30.1/24. That's going to be on VLAN 30. Okay, now let's go to DHCP setup. Next. We're just giving it all the defaults at the moment. Obviously, as I mentioned in previous videos when setting this up, always uses DHCP setup, makes it so much easier. Secondly, when it comes to the address pool, I don't always want to give out everything, so I would adjust these to make that DHCP range a bit smaller. DNS servers, I prefer to use the router itself as DNS, but again, that's all covered in other videos, and I'll increase that lease time. But for our demo here, it doesn't really matter. We're just going to flick straight through them. So that's our DHCP setup. Okay, now what we're going to do is sort out our VLANs. So we're going to go in under Bridge. We're going to go to this VLAN tab. I'm going to add. So the bridge is always going to be that VLAN bridge. So VLAN ID start with 20. So 20 is going to be our host 1, which is connected directly to Ether 2. So we want that to be untagged on that LAN, and we don't want it to be tagged. So we apply that. Okay. Now we're going to do. So you can have one of these set for every single VLAN basically. So VLAN 30 this time. Now we want that tagged to Ether 1. Okay, and we don't want it untagged. Now what we also want to do is we want to tag 20 onto the switch as well. So click that OK. Now these will get populated when we enable that VLAN filtering, and I'll show you what else it's going to do. So under interfaces, because this is an access port and not a trunk port, we want it sorry, not on the port itself. Sorry, under bridge ports, because this is an access port, we want it private VLAN ID. Basically, because it's non-tagged, we want it to match that VLAN. So if you remember, native VLANs is the untagged traffic for a trunk, and then PVID, so port VLAN ID, is the tag for the access port that's untagged. Okay, we can select only untagged and priority tagged, but we'll just omit all. Okay. Now what we're going to do, we've left this one in here. Now we're happy with all that. We're set up okay. I mean, for us, we're okay because we're coming in from this interface. We're not adding that, so we're not going to lose access. But again, just make sure you've got this all nicely set up. And then we go to our bridge. We open it up. We go to the VLAN tag, and now we apply this. Now this is our basically, again, because it's treated like an interface. This would be our default one. Now I'm going to apply that now and just show you what happens. So if we go to our VLANs, see this has all been populated. So it now tells us what it's tagged and untagged on. So VLAN 20 is currently tagged on Ether 1, so the one up to the switch, and it's untagged on 2, and 30 is then tagged on 1. But we've also got these two dynamic ones been added. So 20 and 30 have been tagged on the bridge itself, and then there's also this VLAN 1 is untagged on the VLAN bridge, Ether and Ether 1. So you may or may not know it's best practice and highly recommended that you don't use VLAN 1 anywhere, because it's a major security risk. So if someone comes along and plugs into your network and you've got stuff on VLAN 1, then by chances that's the one they're going to use and access. So there's two things we can do. Firstly, we could go ahead and set on Ether 1, because it's a trunk port and we're not using a native VLAN, we can either set a sorry, I keep going on the actual interface itself, sorry, ports. We can either pick an obscure VLAN ID, like the last VLAN available, or better still, we just say tagged only. Because it's a trunk and we're not going to use native VLANs on it, we can just tag it only. And that does mean if anyone does come along and unplug your switch and then plug their laptop into your switch port, they're not going to be able to get anything, because unless they can guess the VLAN tags. So if we OK that and go back to our VLANs, you can see it's not gone now from here. So we're now just dealing with this VLAN bridge. So we can just go ahead and tag it on the bridge as well. Get rid of that one. And the same for 30. So just always, the first thing you do, add it to your bridge before you add it to your interfaces. Okay, now we're just dealing with this one, and again, because this is the bridge, and we are only dealing with VLANs in the bridge, we can go ahead and under bridge change this to be only tagged. There we go. So now we can see we've got nice and neat. Our tagged on 20 is only on Ether 1, and tagged on 30 is only on Ether 1, and obviously the bridge as well. And then untagged is only on Ether 2. Okay. And we haven't actually assigned anything to this, so what we can do is add it. So we can basically do the same. We want to give it, say, 20 as well. And we'll make that one untagged on 3 as well. So you may think, why have I got more? These aren't VLANs, so these are interfaces. We're actually taking. So if you imagine it, if you do come from a Cisco background, you apply a VLAN in each of the interface configs. Whereas if you've ever used HP or Aruba, you actually apply the interfaces into the VLAN. So much like we're doing now. So the older version I showed you the other day is where you actually can add your VLANs into your interface config, whereas we're actually adding our interfaces into our VLAN config, if that makes sense. Okay, cool. So we're all set up. Okay, so that's not showing up because there's nothing plugged into it, but what we would need to also do is make sure we set the port VLAN as well back to 20 as well. So when there's something plugged into that would show up in there. So basically current, so stuff that's live. So it's just a way to troubleshoot stuff. So it's like, why have I not got any traffic on port 4 and it should be on VLAN 30, but it's getting an IP from VLAN 20. You can then look, oh, untagged is on the wrong one. Okay. So what I mentioned also previously, so now that I've got this, let's just go ahead and turn off VLAN filtering. Actually, no, we'll leave it on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add another VLAN. So we go to here, VLAN, and we'll call this one user 3, for example. We're not going to use this one. I'm going to delete it straight away, but I just want to show you. VLAN 40 and 40. Stick that on our bridge. Okay. Give an IP address. 6840.1/24. Okay, well, let's let me do that. What am I missing? Okay, I had a weird thing earlier where when I did that while this was still enabled, it it threw up an error saying it was invalid, and I just had to disable the filtering and re-enable it. But okay, well, if you do find that, then try that. If you do have any funnies, just turn it off and on again. Okay, that's good to see. I'm trying to get rid of that now because I don't need that anymore. Perhaps it's because I added them all at the same time. I had it enabled and I hadn't actually added these yet so there was none enabled at the time. Okay, so now we can test our machines. Okay, so config. So this is host 1. So this is on VLAN 20, which is good. Okay, got internet. And let's do the same for the other host. Ping the right IP, aren't I? Good. Got the IP, check the IP. So it's VLAN 30. So let's change this to be on VLAN 20. So we're going to jump into our switch. Remember, I've already tagged it. So if we do show MAC address VLAN 20, so it's currently on port 1 only, because if I do 30, it's on 1 and 2. So what we're going to do is go into the config of interface connected to that second machine. Do show run interface. Again, if you're not a Cisco person, then don't worry. This will apply to any VLAN capable switch. So we're going to change this to be 20. So 20. Okay. So we've written it. Okay, let's jump on to our second one now. We can't ping anymore, hasn't actually caught up. Windows hasn't caught up and realised that it's lost access. If we do ipconfig, we've still got the old IP, so let's just, could do release new, but while we got that open, just disable that. And then enable it. Okay. We'll have 20. So we'll have a bunch of releases now in our MikroTik. IP, DHCP, releases. There we go. So we've now got, interestingly, it's dishing out the first IPs here, but it's dishing out the last ones on the other one. Yeah, so as you can see, this host has 2 IPs. Okay, so I hope that was clear. As I mentioned before, if you've ever used the switches, then this is a very similar way. And then it took me a while to get my head around it because, as you can see, when you go to bridge and ports, this hardware offload, basically it means it's because we're doing everything in software because we're not on a switch. So yeah, it took me a while to get my head around how that getting it to work properly on the switch. I was basically doing like a router, and I was just, you know, on a large switch that was doing a lot of traffic. The performance wasn't great, and the CPU was just getting quite higher than I would have expected it to. So I eventually got this is on the very, you know, beginning of these switches. So we're talking back in 2000 and I don't know, mid 2000s maybe. No, later than that, 2010s onwards. So whenever they came out, the cloud router switches, they're with this dedicated chipset. So yeah, and there wasn't a whole lot of doco out about it then. So yeah, once we figured that out, yeah, it was a game changer, and a big fan of their switches. So I'm going to get my hands on one of their switches, and I'll probably do this demo again with an actual MikroTik switch, and then we'll maybe stick in some APs, and we'll do a full, you know, end-to-end solution. So MikroTik router, switch, and APs all on, you know, different VLANs. So yeah, stay tuned for that. But yeah, please comment on any of these videos. People do, and I really appreciate it. They give me ideas. They, you know, pick me up on things by all means. I'm not perfect. I don't know everything. I'm just trying to piece together useful videos for people and stuff that I particularly would be looking to watch, or stuff I've looked for in the past. So I don't necessarily want to go out and cover every single, you know, step by step, this is how you do everything. But if someone's got a particular, you know, scenario, topology, problem they're working on a particular firmware, we can go into that level of detail if you wish. So yeah, please get in touch. But if not, I'll say thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. Again, that massive help gives me confidence, gives me enthusiasm to make more videos. And yeah, if not, I'll see you on the next one. So thanks.